Joining us now to talk about the implications of that latest development is Suzanne Chad, once again a political science professor at North Central College. Suzanne, thanks for being with us here. Let's talk about this and put it in context. President-elect Joe Biden is fine with Trump not being in attendance. And in fact, he said it's the one thing they agree upon, him not being there. But it is a break with tradition. Do you think that matters?
Yes, I do. It is a break from tradition, as you said. It's happened 3 times in history and not since 1869. This is one of the symbolic moments where we sort of cap off the peaceful transition of power. It's an important symbolic moment, which is why presidents have done it for, as we said, the last 150 years. But I appreciate what President-elect Biden said today, which is, after the events of Wednesday, that it may not be appropriate for President Trump to be there because of his rhetoric, because of what he might say or do, because of potential backlash, protests, riots, even at the inauguration. If he is there, it could make it worse. And so I think it's important that he's not there because of historical precedent. But in some ways, I agree with President-elect Biden that I think it is probably best he not attend.
Well, Suzanne, earlier we talked to WGN political analyst Paul Lisnek, and he talked about the impeachment and what could happen and why it's most likely not to happen while he's still in office. But I know that a lot of the senators and Congress people on both sides of the aisle are looking for a resignation or something tangible for, for him not to leave with impunity.
Yeah. Absolutely. There has to be, there's some good agreement, as you said, across the aisle for some kind of recognition of complicity, whether it be an invocation of the 25th Amendment, which Vice President Pence says at this point he has no interest in entertaining, whether it be articles of impeachment, which we know of actually one has already been drawn up on incitement of insurrection. And then the other would be a resignation, which the president is reportedly saying that he will not do. So while these are all options legally, the likelihood that any of them gain enough traction, and even if they do end in a result where the president is not in office on January 20th, seems quite unlikely.
And in that speech that the president made from the White House yesterday, where he essentially seemed to concede the race, as close as he has come yet, but he talked about his desire now to put the focus on a seamless, peaceful transition of power. But given the events of Wednesday, we've already missed that mark here. The option of a peaceful transition of power is already gone. It is off the table. So what happens as we move from one president to a new one?
That's an excellent point. Typically the concession happens, the next day after an election or even a couple of days later. And so now we have a very tight window for the outgoing president to say that he will fully comply with the new president coming in. The transition between presidents is a critical part of the continuity of government. One of the reasons, for example, we know that the National Security Advisor, Robert O'Brien, does not want to resign is because he's fearful of not having the continuity if he is gone. So this short window of where we hope the president will be amenable to these transition items, it's going to be a lot harder for President-elect Biden to come in on day one. He's been in office before, he's got some experience, so it won't be as tricky for him as some others.
If the president were to pardon himself from federal prosecution, what could he be facing stateside?
Yeah, that's a great question. There's so many lawsuits. I don't even, to be honest, know the number of them pending against the president right now. Some are federal, some are state, as you mentioned, depending on what's in the pardon, if it's blanket, if it has specifics. There are any number of ways where the president, once he is back in civilian life, could be subject to indictment, criminal procedures, civil procedures, and potential jail time or fines. And so we will know a lot more, of course, once he's out of office, what that might look like, but it could potentially be in front of him.
Yeah, and quickly, I wonder if it would have anything to do with what happened with the insurrection. That couldn't be in New York, could it?
No, this would be a federal crime, right? This would be something that would be done by the federal government. And so now the question for President-elect Biden would be, would he direct his Justice Department to potentially go after former President Trump for it? And I don't know that President-elect Biden has an appetite for that right now.
Exactly.
A lot could happen between now and then. Suzanne Chad, thank you very much for your time tonight.
Yeah, thank you both. Take good care.
Have a good weekend.